Hello, friends, and welcome back to Eclectic Knowledge and our series Compelling Stories for a Dinner Party. I'm your host, Christopher James, and tonight you'll hear about one of the most famous unsolved murder mysteries in Germany, explore a famous hoax that was born out of revenge, and we'll look at a monumental moment in broadcast history that has been tainted by lies. So settle in, pop the cork, and pass the cheese plate. Let's get into it. In the heart of Bavaria, nestled amidst rolling hills and whispering forests, lay the isolated farmstead of Hinterkaifeck, a place shrouded in mystery and cloaked in an eerie silence. It was the setting for one of the most chilling unsolved crimes in German history. Our story unfolds on the cusp of spring in 1922, when the tranquil life of the farm's inhabitants was brutally extinguished by an unknown assailant. The Gruber family, known throughout their rural community, carried an air of mystery about them. Andreas Gruber, the family head, was known for his stoic nature and aggressive behavior towards others. His wife, Gazelia, was recognized for her resilience, bearing the visage of a life filled with toil and endurance. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, navigated widowhood with grace, despite the murmurs of shame and scandal that sometimes shadowed her footsteps. The youthful spirits of her children, Gazelia and Joseph, brought a spark of joy to the homestead, their innocence untouched by the complex world around them. Into this intricate family dynamic stepped Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, full of optimism yet oblivious to the dark turn her path would soon take. As the harsh embrace of winter began to wane, the residents of the secluded Hinterkaifeck farm felt the icy tendrils of apprehension tighten around them. Andreas Gruber, the stoic patriarch, found himself unable to shake a growing sense of foreboding. In the beginning, it was an innocuous piece of paper, a newspaper from Munich, an object so mundane yet so utterly out of place in their rustic existence that it seemed to have materialized from another world. Then came the footprints, a silent procession of marks in the snow leading from the foreboding expanse of the forest to the very threshold of their home. They appeared without witness, leading nowhere, as if the bearer vanished into the ether. Most unsettling were the sounds that began to emanate from the attic, a space shrouded in dust and memories, now the stage for an unseen presence. The creak of weight on old wood, the whisper of movement in the stagnant air, these were the signs that sowed a creeping dread into the hearts of the Gruber family, a prelude to the nightmare that awaited. As the calendar marked the arrival of March 31st, 1922, an ominous pall settled over Hinterkaifeck. The day progressed like any other, with the rhythmic toil of farm life playing its timeless melody. Yet, as dusk approached, the air grew heavy with an unspoken dread. The Gruber family, alongside their new maid Maria Baumgartner, found themselves ensnared in a meticulously woven trap, their fates sealed by an unseen architect of death. The barn, once a center of farm life, was turned into a grim setting for a series of brutal killings. The victims were somehow led to the barn one by one, only to meet their end at the hands of an unseen attacker. The mattock, typically used for farm work, became a weapon, efficiently used to commit a horrifying act of violence. The horror didn't stop at the barn, it continued inside the house, where Joseph and Maria Baumgartner were killed in their sleep, unaware of the terror that had entered their home. Their deaths marked the final chapter of this tragic event, leaving a lasting impact on the community and history. After the killings, a heavy silence fell over Hinterkaifeck, as if everything had paused. Despite this, signs of normal life continued under the killer's control. For 3 days, the murderer stayed, taking care of the farm animals, cooking meals, and keeping the fire going, all while surrounded by the murder victims. This eerie period, where routine farm life went on next to the aftermath of such violence, highlighted the killer's disturbed state of mind. The reasons behind these actions stayed unknown, making this phase of the story even more unsettling. In the soft light of dawn on April 4th, 1922, a silence hung over Hinterkaifeck, a silence so profound it seemed as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The catalyst for the grim discovery was mundane, a routine visit by coffee sellers Hans Sharofsky and Edward Sharofsky, their arrival marked by the cheerful rattle of their cart, a stark contrast to the ominous quiet of the farm. Their calls, once greeted with warmth, now echoed unanswered, their knocks dissipating into the chilling silence. A cursory exploration revealed nothing but the open gate of the machine house, an unspoken invitation to a scene of horror they were spared from witnessing. As the sun arced higher, casting light on the unspeakable, it was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, driven by a blend of concern and an inexplicable intuition, who led the fateful expedition to Hinterkaifeck. Accompanied by Michael Pohl and Jacob Sigel, their steps were heavy with the weight of impending doom as they breached the perimeter of the farm. The barn, a structure that once stood as a testament to the fruits of hard labor, now held within its walls a tableau of horror that would sear itself into the chronicles of history. The investigation that ensued, led by Inspector George Reingruber, was a journey into the abyss and was marred by complications and setbacks from the outset, leading to a series of dead ends and unresolved questions that haunt the case to this day. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, the crime scene was compromised. Before police arrived, several community members had entered the barn and the house, disturbing the scene and potentially contaminating evidence. This initial mishandling set a precedent for the challenge that would plague the investigation. Early efforts by the police were hindered by the lack of advanced forensic techniques available at the time. Basic investigative methods were employed, but the absence of tools like fingerprinting or DNA analysis meant that physical evidence could not be conclusively linked to a suspect. So what do we know about the killer? Well, if we peel back the layers of the Hinterkaifeck murders, we are drawn into a shadowy world where secrets and motives intertwine with the macabre, and a list of suspects emerges from the mist, each carrying the weight of suspicion. First, we encounter Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, presumed to have fallen on the battlefields of France during World War I. Yet whispers in a village spoke of a man who defied death, his body having never been found. Could a man believed to be swallowed by the chaos of conflict return seeking revenge? It was well known in the village and established in court that Andreas Gruber had been having incestuous relations with his daughter, Victoria. Andreas was convicted of incest and spent a year in prison because of it. It was widely believed that Victoria's youngest son, Joseph, was the product of her father's rape. Was it possible that her husband, Carl Gabriel, found out about the incest and killed the family in a blind rage? The absence of Carl Gabriel's physical remains fueled speculation of that theory, but proof of the specter of Carl Gabriel wandering the Russian front or the Bavarian countryside remains an enigma as elusive as his fate. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor ensnared in a web of intimacy and dispute with Victoria, strides into the heart of suspicion. Victoria claimed that her youngest child, Joseph, was fathered by Lorenz, but Lorenz also knew about the incestuous rape of Victoria, and as such would not at first claim Joseph as his own. It is believed the claim of paternity caused conflict in the Gruber household, specifically between Andreas and Victoria, as recently as 2 days before the murders. The actions of Lorenz in the aftermath of the murders were considered by some as peculiar and unsettling. They paint a portrait of a man intimately entwined with the victims. The ease with which he navigated the crime scene, producing his own personal key to the house, his familiarity with the farmstead, and some unsettling remarks made a year after the murders, all hint at a knowledge that surpassed that of a mere acquaintance. Was it the heartache of a spurned lover, the desperation of a father, or the cold calculation of a murderer that drove his actions on that fateful day? Lorenz was considered by many to be the definitive killer of the Gruber family. He was never arrested, and years later in life he successfully sued several people for referring to him as the Hinterkaifeck Killer. Amidst the turmoil of post-war Germany, the Gump brothers, Adolf and Anton, emerge as figures cloaked in the dark vestiges of political unrest. Their association with the Freikorps, a paramilitary group marred by violence, casts a long shadow. Add in the deathbed confession of their sister, Crescentia Mayer, implicating the brothers in the bloodshed, and it weaves a thread of guilt and familial betrayal that seems plausible. It is clear that Crescentia has told this story at least 3 other times in her life, twice to different priests and once at her father's funeral. Yet the shroud of time and the absence of concrete evidence render her motives speculative. Several others of the 15 Gump siblings came forward to dispute their sister's claim, confirming Crescentia had always hated her brothers Adolf and Anton specifically, but held disdain for most of her siblings. The deathbed confession may have been an angry sister's final attempt to cause grief. The Bichler brothers, Anton and Karl, alongside George Siegel, are painted against the backdrop of familiarity and contempt. Their labor on the farm granted them first-hand knowledge of the property. The former family maid, Crescence Reiger, reported that Anton had previously said he thought the family should be dead. The context of the statement suggests the laborers also know of the family's secrets. Their knowledge of the family's secrets and their whispered threats against the Gruber family weave a tapestry of suspicion tightly around them. Yet the absence of definitive proof, the echoes of hearsay, and the passage of time blur the lines between fact and folklore. One chilling theory posits that the patriarch of the Gruber family, Andreas Gruber, was not a victim, but the orchestrator of the horrifying events at Hinterkaifeck. According to this view, the seemingly inexplicable behavior of the killer, remaining at the farm for days, maintaining daily chores, could be explained by Andreas himself committing the murders and having nowhere else to go. The theory suggests that on that fateful night, Andreas, driven to the brink by perceived betrayal and rage, brutally murdered his own family members. This theory paints a picture of a man unraveling upon discovering the true paternity of his grandson, Joseph, a secret supposedly kept by his daughter Victoria. Enraged by the deceit and emboldened by his violent tendencies, Andreas may have lashed out in a fatal confrontation that ended in bloodshed. In this narrative, after Victoria and her parents argued, possibly over the child's paternity, she fled into the forest, fearing her father's wrath. When Andreas learned that he was not Joseph's father, his fury allegedly unleashed a spree of violence. He is said to have beaten and strangled Victoria before turning the matic on other intervening family members. During this rage, he may have attempted to assault his granddaughter, Kazelia, leading to further intervention by other family members. The next day, while attempting to bury the bodies and finding the ground too frozen, Andreas purportedly continued his chores on the farm, avoiding detection by staying out of sight when visitors arrived. After hiding the murder weapon in the attic, his own demise came when Lorenz Schlittenbauer, driven by a mixture of concern and suspicion, confronted him in the barn. In a tragic twist, Andreas was fatally injured during this confrontation. Schlittenbauer, who later entered the house using a key he had taken from Andreas, found his young son among the victims, sealing his resolve to cover up the incident. Haunted by the events, he reportedly maintained his silence, divulging only cryptic hints about his deeper knowledge of that night's events. This theory, while speculative, delves deep into the psychological and emotional turmoil within the Gruber household, offering a dark and twisted possibility that Andreas Gruber could have been capable of such heinous acts. As the years passed, the investigation saw numerous suspects interrogated, from transient laborers to neighbors with potential motives. Despite these efforts, no conclusive evidence was ever found to definitively identify the perpetrator. Theories abounded from family disputes to robbery motives, but none could be proven beyond doubt. Who do you think murdered the Gruber family? Be sure to leave us a comment below and tell us your theory about the killer. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button for the newest stories and that like button to tell us how we're doing. And now, a story for the main course. It's time for us to peel back the layers of one of the most captivating hoaxes of the 20th century, to reveal a plot born of bitter animosity and cold revenge. So fill your glass with a smoky malt from Scotland, and let's dive into the shadowy depths of Loch Ness and the mastermind behind its most infamous legend. Our tale begins in the early 1930s, amidst the rugged beauty of the Scottish Highlands. Loch Ness, a body of water as enigmatic as it is deep, became the stage for a story that would ensnare the world. It was here, against this backdrop of mystery and folklore, that a man named Marmaduke Wetherell stepped into the limelight, embarking on an expedition that would forever alter the course of cryptozoological lore. Wetherell, a seasoned big game hunter with a reputation for tracking the untrackable, was commissioned by the Daily Mail, a titan of the press eager to capture the public's imagination. Tasked with proving the existence of the elusive Loch Ness monster, Wetherell set out with determination, his every move shadowed by the eager anticipation of a captivated audience. The drama unfolded when Wetherell, with the eyes of the world upon him, announced a groundbreaking discovery. Large, mysterious footprints near the water's edge, surely the mark of the beast itself. The evidence was compelling, the story sensational. Plaster casts were hastily made, dispatched to the Natural History Museum in London for validation, the final piece of the puzzle in Wetherell's quest for the truth. The tale took a dramatic turn when the museum's verdict was revealed. The footprints, they declared, were not those of a prehistoric monster, but rather the imprint of a hippopotamus, likely from a taxidermy artifact used as an umbrella stand. The revelation was a blow, not just to Wetherell, but to the very heart of the monster mythos. The Daily Mail, quick to distance themselves from the debacle, spared no mercy in their public denouncement of Wetherell. Humiliated and scorned, the hunter found himself the prey, caught in a web of ridicule and betrayal. Yet, from the ashes of his disgrace, Wetherell conceived a plot of revenge as elaborate as it was daring. With the aid of his stepson, Christian Sperling, a skilled sculptor, and a close-knit circle of conspirators organized by a friend, Maurice Chambers, Wetherell set the stage for his grand deception. A toy submarine, ingeniously modified with a serpentine neck and head, crafted from wood putty, would become the centerpiece of this elaborate ruse. Under the cover of darkness, the team ventured to the loch, their creation in tow, and photographed the fake monster in the murky waters of Loch Ness. But for their hoax to truly captivate the public and gain legitimacy, they needed a figure of unimpeachable respectability to present the photograph to the world. Enter Dr. Robert Wilson, a friend of Maurice Chambers, one of the co-conspirators. Chambers approached Wilson with a proposition: to become the public face of the photograph, lending it the gravitas and credibility it needed to be taken seriously. Wilson, known to enjoy a good practical joke, agreed to the scheme, though he insisted on a degree of anonymity, leading to the photograph being dubbed the surgeon's photo. With the photograph in hand, Dr. Wilson presented it to the Daily Mail, the very publication that had once ridiculed Wetherell. The newspaper, unaware of the photograph's dubious origins, published it with great fanfare, heralding it as definitive proof of the Loch Ness monster's existence. The image was electric, the sensation immediate. The surgeon's photo was a masterpiece of illusion, a beacon of mystery that would ignite imaginations for decades. For 60 years, the photograph stood as a testament to the unknown, a symbol of the enduring allure of the Loch Ness Monster. But, as with all great tales, the truth eventually surfaced. The creator of the fake monster, Wetherell's stepson, Christian Sperling, supplied a deathbed confession, peeling back the curtain on the hoax, revealing the intricate details of their deception and the motives that drove them to such lengths. In the tangled web of deception and intrigue that surrounded the Loch Ness Monster hoax, the question of whether Marmaduke Wetherell truly got his revenge on the Daily Mail is a compelling one. After the public humiliation and scorn he faced from the newspaper, Wetherell's elaborate ruse with the surgeon's photo was more than just a hoax. It was a meticulously crafted act of retribution. By orchestrating the creation and dissemination of the surgeon's photo, Wetherell sought not just to redeem his tarnished reputation, but to turn the tables on the Daily Mail, the very entity that had ridiculed him. The photograph, with its eerie depiction of a monster emerging from the loch, captured the world's imagination and, for a time, lent credence to the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. The Daily Mail found itself at the center of a global sensation, propelled by the very story they had sought to debunk. The newspaper, eager for sensational stories, unwittingly became the vehicle for Wetherell's revenge, spreading the image far and wide and embedding the legend of the Loch Ness Monster even deeper into public consciousness. The Daily Mail, having once sought to expose a myth, found itself instrumental in perpetrating that myth, thanks to Wetherell's cunning plan. It wasn't until the truth behind the photo was revealed years later that the full scope of Wetherell's revenge became apparent. The hoax not only restored Wetherell's sense of personal vindication, but also left a lasting imprint on the lore of the Loch Ness, forever associated with the Daily Mail's history. Did Wetherell get his revenge? What are your thoughts? We'd love to know what you think. Was he justified in his actions, or was he acting out of a wounded ego? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going long after dinner. Our final story for the evening is about an iconic moment of Americana, a story that echoes the power of media and the human psyche. Most of us have heard this story, but do we really know the truth behind the legend? Gather round as we recount the night Orson Welles orchestrated an invasion not from the stars, but from the airwaves, with his legendary broadcast of The War of the Worlds. So try the tiramisu, then prepare for a journey back to the eve of October 30th, 1938, a night that would etch itself into the chronicles of broadcast history. Picture this. Families across America are huddled around their radios, seeking a respite from the Great Depression with the warm glow of their favorite shows. Into this comfortable scene of Americana steps renowned director and storyteller Orson Welles. His plan is to transform the H.G. Wells sci-fi classic, The War of the Worlds, into a radio drama so realistic it would blur the lines between fiction and reality. And he would do exactly that. The historic broadcast started with weather reports and music, eerily interrupted by urgent updates from astronomers and reporters. Updates simulating news bulletins that reported a Martian invasion, as if it were happening in real time. The effect was staggering and painted a vivid picture of devastation wrought by alien invaders. The genius of the broadcast lay in its meticulous construction. The actors' performances were hauntingly realistic, the sound effects chillingly convincing. Listeners tuning in after the initial disclaimer were thrust into a world under siege, with no indication that the chaos unfolding was but a clever ruse. The crackling airwaves carried the sounds of panic, the hum of Martian machines, the desperate cries for help, all meticulously crafted to captivate and horrify the audience. It was this masterful illusion that sowed seeds of confusion among the listeners, some of whom were actually convinced that the end of days had arrived. But what about those reports of mass hysteria? Were they correct? Was America truly on the brink of a hysterical breakdown? The newspapers the next day were ablaze with tales of terror-stricken citizens. But was this the reality? Or was it, perhaps, a narrative conveniently spun? Herein lies the crux of the story. The reason for over-reporting the hysteria was that of simple rivalry between the burgeoning medium of radio and the established dominion of print. In the 1930s, radio was emerging as a formidable force in news and entertainment, encroaching on territory long held by newspapers. The sensational reports of widespread panic can be seen through the lens of this competition, with newspapers seizing an opportunity to cast doubt and further question the reliability and responsibility of radio broadcasting. In fact, if we look at the information gathered about the radio audience that was listening to the show that evening, we can see the metrics paint a very different picture. First, the entire country was not listening to the broadcast. Nielsen ratings of the era suggest that the majority of listeners were actually tuned in to a rival radio program, Edgar Bergen's popular comedy show, and only a fraction of that audience switched over to the War of the Worlds after the musical interlude. This, coupled with the fact that the broadcast itself had several disclaimers clarifying its fictional nature, cast doubt on the scale of the purported panic. In actuality, accounts of widespread hysteria were sparse and often anecdotal, with many stories being debunked as exaggerations or outright fabrications. It would seem that while there were pockets of anxiety and confusion, the nation as a whole remained largely unshaken. It seems the true power of Wells' broadcast lay not in its ability to incite panic, but in its masterful use of the medium to blur the lines between reality and fiction. We'd love to know what you think. Do you think an American audience could ever be duped into believing fiction? Did you know about the rivalry between print and radio? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're there, please like, share, and subscribe. It would really help our channel. As we end this recital of tales for the evening, let us reflect on an unsolved murder from history, of cold revenge from Loch Ness, and of hysteria that never was, and be reminded of the enduring power of storytelling, the responsibility of media creators, and the susceptibility of the human mind to the allure of the dramatic. We hope you enjoyed these stories for a dinner party, and we hope to see you at the table again next time. Until then, my friends, may your dinner parties be ever engaging and your stories always compelling. Good night.